She had never once missed a shift and never asked for help. But one night, she did. When her boss discovered the truth, he couldn't just ignore it. Success didn't come easy for Donovan Hale. He had earned every ounce of it. Late nights, missed birthdays, sacrifices that the people around him could never truly understand. From a small office in Cincinnati, Ohio, to building a multi-million-dollar logistics empire, Donovan's company, Hale Freight Solutions, was founded on one core belief: hard work pays off. But tonight, as he was finishing up reports in his glass-walled office, something caught his attention. The cafeteria should have been closed by now, but one of his employees lingered by the food counter. Tasha Winston. He knew her, though not personally, just enough to recognize the type of worker she was. Reliable, punctual, never complained, and always gave her best. She was the kind of employee who worked double shifts with ease, never backing down from a crisis. But tonight, she seemed different, hesitant, looking over her shoulder as she moved toward the kitchen staff. Donovan watched her, curious. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the exchange, a look of concern from the cooks, a pause, and finally, a takeout container handed over. Tasha murmured a thank you, quickly slipping the container into her oversized tote bag. Then she walked off, head down, moving quickly as if she didn't want anyone to see her. Something about the scene didn't sit right with him. Donovan wasn't the kind of boss to pry into his employees' personal lives. He had a business to run, and he ran it simply: you work hard, you get paid. But Tasha, asking for food, gnawed at him. She worked more than anyone, double shifts, sometimes triple, so why did she need to ask for a meal? He told himself he was overthinking it. It wasn't his problem, but the thought of it lingered in his mind as he returned to his report, trying to focus. Yet, Tasha's request for food wouldn't leave him. He wasn't one to get involved in personal matters, but there was something about this that made him wonder if there was more to the story. So, despite the nagging voice in his head, he found himself walking out of his office and into the quiet corridors of the building. Tasha was already outside, walking quickly with purpose. But there was a weight to her pace, a heaviness that spoke of exhaustion. The wind cut through the parking lot, but she wrapped her thin jacket tighter around her and kept moving. No car, no hesitation to find a ride. She walked straight to the nearest bus stop. Donovan hesitated. This was crossing a line, but when the bus arrived and Tasha boarded, he found himself doing the same. The ride was quiet, the dim fluorescent lights overhead flickering intermittently. Tasha sat near the middle, leaning her forehead against the window, looking drained but not angry. There was no frustration in her eyes, just the quiet acceptance of a life that demanded far too much of her. He sat toward the back of the bus, keeping his distance. What was he even looking for? The ride stretched on, passing business districts and shopping centers, before reaching older, more worn areas of town. Finally, Tasha pulled the stop cord and stepped off the bus, her pace quick but still heavy. Donovan followed at a distance, crossing the street just as she turned the corner and entered a small, weathered apartment complex. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, unlocking her door. Donovan paused just before the building, watching as Tasha entered her apartment. Through a thin curtain, he could see the interior: a single mattress on the floor, no couch, no dining table, just a few blankets, a couple of neatly folded clothes on a plastic crate, and two young children peeking out from behind the mattress. Tasha knelt beside them, opening the takeout container with careful hands. The kids, no older than 6, eagerly gathered around her as she split the meal between them. Tasha wasn't eating herself, she was feeding her children. She had asked for food because her family needed it. The weight of the moment pressed down on Donovan. For years, he had been focused on building a business, pushing his employees to work harder, faster, and longer. But had he ever truly considered what happened when they clocked out? Tasha wasn't just putting in double shifts, she was surviving them. Donovan didn't know what to do with this new understanding. His mind raced, but all he could think about was the struggle happening in that small apartment, a mother doing everything she could to keep her children fed while working harder than anyone else in his company. He couldn't look away. What was he supposed to do now? Inside the apartment, Tasha remained seated, her back against the peeling wall as the children ate. She didn't complain, didn't show frustration, just quiet acceptance. When her daughter asked if they'd have breakfast tomorrow, Tasha smiled, a smile that was meant to comfort her children, not herself. Donovan stood there, overwhelmed. He had spent his career believing that hard work led to success. But what did that mean when people worked harder than anyone and still couldn't afford the basics? It wasn't just a failure of individuals, it was a failure of the system. He had to do something. He couldn't walk away from this. That night, sitting in his car, Donovan realized he couldn't ignore it anymore. Tomorrow, he would talk to Tasha, but not as her boss. He would talk to her as someone who had finally seen the truth. The next morning, Tasha came to his office. She looked as exhausted as the night before, but there was something else in her eyes, a quiet wariness, a hesitation. "You wanted to see me, sir?" she asked. Donovan took a deep breath. "I saw you last night, Tasha." She stiffened. "Excuse me?" "I followed you home," he said, his voice steady. "I saw your apartment. Your kids." Tasha's breath caught. He could see the shift in her, the defensiveness, the instinct to protect herself from judgment. But Donovan wasn't there to judge. "I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because I should have seen this sooner. And I want to fix it." Tasha didn't move for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't want a handout." "This isn't a handout," Donovan replied. "This is me correcting a mistake I didn't realize I was making." Tasha's eyes widened, and Donovan continued. "I've been running this company under the assumption that hard work always leads to success. But last night, I realized it doesn't work that way for everyone." Tasha sat silently, still digesting his words. "I don't want you to struggle just to survive," Donovan said. "No one who works as hard as you should have to." He reached into his desk and slid a folder toward her. "It's an internal program we're launching immediately. Higher wages, emergency childcare assistance, financial planning resources. It's not just for you. It's for everyone here." Tasha stared at the folder, overwhelmed, not sure what to say. Donovan leaned back in his chair, watching her. "It's not charity. It's what should have been in place a long time ago." Her fingers trembled as she picked up the folder. For the first time since she entered his office, she exhaled without tension. "Thank you," she whispered. Donovan nodded. "Thank you for holding on long enough for me to see it. But was it enough to undo years of struggle?" Tasha wasn't sure what to feel. Relief? Gratitude? Hesitation? Donovan saw it, all the doubts, the battle she was facing inside. As she stood to leave, Donovan said something unexpected. "I want to meet them." Tasha stopped by the door, caught off guard. "Ooh, your kids." Tasha hesitated, but Donovan stood firm. "If I'm going to fix this company, I need to remember who I'm fighting for." Tasha gave the smallest nod, and, for the first time, she left his office with a little more weight lifted off her shoulders. A week later, Donovan didn't just throw money at the problem. He got involved. He sat with HR, reviewed wages, and restructured the entire pay scale. He redirected executive bonuses to fund new initiatives like child care assistance, meal programs, and financial literacy workshops. He kept his word. And one evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Donovan knocked on the door of Tasha's apartment. She answered, her eyes softening as she saw him. "You actually came," she said, a surprised smile tugging at her lips. "I said I would," Donovan replied. Inside, the apartment looked different. A couch, a dining table, backpacks by the door, toys scattered on the floor. It wasn't luxury, but it was home. Two small children peeked around the corner, and Tasha introduced them. This is Mr. Hale, Mommy's boss. Her daughter, clutching a stuffed bear, studied him and then asked, "You make the rules?" Donovan knelt slightly. "I used to," he said, "but your mom helped me change them." The little girl considered this for a moment before offering a tiny, cautious smile. "Good," she said. And in that moment, Donovan knew this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about people's real lives, real struggles. Hard work shouldn't just lead to survival. It should lead to a life worth living. And he was going to make sure it did. If this story made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's start seeing the people behind the work.